everyone talks about this idea that like own your data and like get paid for your data. The reality is your data is probably not worth anything, but there is a version of the world where you as a person with an audience can actually choose to amplify things and then actually participate on the upside in a programmatic way.
Not a dividend.
It's a tale of two clans.
Now, your losses are on someone else's balance sheet.
Generally speaking, airdrops are kind of pointless anyways.
Unnamed trading firms who are very involved.
I like that ETH is the ultimate Ponzi.
DeFi protocols are the antidote to this problem.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Chopping Block. Every couple weeks, the four of us get together and give the industry insider's perspective on the crypto topics of the day. So quick intros. First, we got Tom, the DeFi maven and master of memes.
Hello, everyone.
Next, we've got Tarun, the Giga Brain and Grand Poobah at Gauntlet.
Aloha.
And joining us today, we've got Dan, the Duke of Decentralized Dialogue at Farcaster.
What?
Thanks for having me.
How long did that one take you, Haseeb?
I thought that was pretty good. Thank you. And then I'm Haseeb, the head hype man at Dragonfly. We are early stage investors in crypto, but I want to caveat that nothing we say here is investment advice, legal advice, or even life advice. Please see choppingblock.xyz for more disclosures. So, man of the hour, Dan, it's great to have you on the show. We just spent the last episode gushing about how much you have been kicking ass with Farcaster. And we thought it made sense to get you on the show personally to have you tell the world and tell us the story of Farcaster. I know that you've been grinding on this project for a long time, and it's now suddenly had its moment of being sort of shining the crypto spotlight directly on what you're building. How does it feel? I know that you've been kind of toiling in the doldrums of crypto on decentralized social. Talk to us about what that's like.
Yeah, so let's start off with a caveat: is we're not out of the woods quite yet. I mean, we've had a lot of growth in the last 2 weeks, about 10x, which is always good to have fall out of the sky. But there's a lot of work left to do, especially if we want to compare ourselves to what we should be comparing is Web 2, right? So like if you take any Web 2 social network, Farcaster is still kind of a blip relative to the size and scale. That said, I think we're really excited because we're finally in a place where I think we're in the conversation, as you kind of point out, in that it was kind of this sideshow before, whereas now I think people are starting to pay attention to Farcaster within the crypto native world, right? Like you have all the crypto native companies have reached out one way or another. They want to get their brand account set up. And so definitely an inflection point in the sense that I think people are aware of what we're doing. And I think it's on us now to kind of like figure out, okay, how do we cross the chasm to the kind of next 10x and the next 10x after that? I think if we get to something on the order of, we're about 50,000 daily active users of the protocol today. I think if we can get to something like 5 million, then it starts to become, I think, real from a kind of like Lindy. It's probably not going to go away anytime soon. And obviously, if you get to something like 50 million people using the protocol, and again, it can be across a bunch of different apps, then I think you start to have a conversation that maybe it is becoming more mainstream. And I think a good like proxy for that is like Coinbase has about 100 million people who have an account with KYC. So if you can kind of get to some level of, their total user base, obviously they don't have 50 million people using the app every day. You probably are starting to crack into mainstream. And then obviously if you can get 50 million people to be using the protocol every day, then it's actually something that normal people are clearly using. I don't think there are 50 million crypto natives that are using any app or any chain right now.
So I wrote a tweet a little while back, looking back at the stats for Friendtech, which people might remember was the viral social, the SocialFi application that took off. I think it was like last summer, maybe late summer. And it basically went from kind of peak virality to then totally falling off a cliff within about 4 months. And in response to posting that chart, Vitalik actually responded something that he said, I'm registering a prediction. Farcaster and Lens will not be deserted in 4 months or in 1 year. It seems like now there's increasing convergence that what Friendtech was doing with respect to connecting money and speculation with social was the wrong avenue, or maybe is just likely to result in this kind of bubble speculative behavior. How do you think about that? And what did you take away from seeing what happened with Friendtech last year?
So yeah, let me start off with, I feel like people tend to try to create beef between Friendtech and Farcaster because I think generally there's just not that much going on in consumer crypto. So naturally, like, hey, let's try to generate drama. I'm not saying that you were trying to do that. No issue with Friend Tech. Like, I actually think they had some very clever things that they did, especially around taking advantage of the PWA changes that Apple kind of released last year. And they were kind of first out of the gate on that. And I think cemented something that
PWA being progressive web app.
Web app. And I think something that I just like hammer home with crypto founders, especially in the consumer space, is if you're not building on mobile, you don't matter. 85% of usage of Farcaster is mobile. If you look at Twitter, they released minutes usage. Elon tweeted this, I think, a couple months ago. 88% of usage of Twitter is mobile. I think like Instagram, obviously, is like 95%. So the fact that you had a mobile app that they kind of built, like clearly they know what they're doing in terms of like building for consumer crypto. I think the thing that I've always kind of tried to figure out is social networks are built off of status, and Eugene Wei has a famous essay on this, status as a service, which I think is like a good articulation of these points. And I think one challenging thing about status is it's something that's earned, and you cannot buy status, right? Humans are really good at knowing about people who've tried to like buy their status. They come off as inauthentic or fake, and I think proof of work is actually something that humans value implicitly, especially in kind of social networks. And I think generally, like if you think about like social networks, what kind of itches do they scratch for consumers? Like, why do people use them? They tend to use them from a leisure standpoint, right? They're not using them professionally for work. I mean, obviously Twitter kind of blends that. Obviously LinkedIn is a lot more. But generally, why do people use social networks? It's they're spending time, like passing time, and they're using it for either entertainment, or frankly, they're trying to meet other people, right? So the dating apps are kind of a certain type of social network. And so if you don't actually solve for one of those two things, it's very difficult to create sustained long-term usage as a social network. And again, I think it less to do with Friend Tech as much as just when you're building consumer products, you have to kind of tap into latent consumer behaviors that they didn't even know what they wanted, right? Like consumer preferences, they're going to tell you one thing and then they're actually going to do a completely different thing. The consumers are very aspirational. And I think you have to, and it's not like we have some crazy insight, but I think like ultimately sustained social networks are fundamentally built around something that is a deep-seated like kind of need for a human and their willingness to kind of keep coming back to the app every single day.
So wait, also, I want to name and shame a little bit. I think neither Haseeb nor Tom have a Farcaster account.
That's not true. I have a
Tom was really early, and then
I'm like 103. So actually,
okay.
I don't even know if you can have a Farcaster account.
Yeah, Tom came in like a kind of like a bat out of hell in early 2021 when I was onboarding people, dropped a few memes, and then disappeared. Which I mean is basically the story for everybody. So I hold nothing against anybody on that.
Yeah, no, I legit do not have a Farcaster account, so I will take that. I did say on the last show that I'm like basically a boomer, and I try to avoid I am terrified that Farcaster will actually take off like another 100x, and then I have to get on. But I am very much like late majority when it comes to consumer. So what is that? Early majority? Late majority, whatever. I'm like right at the 50% mark, basically. Once everyone else is on, I'm like, oh fuck, I gotta get on. I was the same thing with Clubhouse. Everybody was like, Clubhouse
ended up working out, and it's so peaked and went down, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I did eventually get on right when the second half of people were getting on board to Clubhouse, and I was very angry about it.
But the interesting thing about Clubhouse was people rotated their Clubhouse followings into other social networks. Like Clubhouse crashed, and then they moved their followings into Twitter, which I thought was an interesting piece of social media history. I don't know if you've seen such a big, like, almost everyone moved, as a platform crashed type of thing.
Well, there's a little inside baseball there, by the way, is that Twitter, the only reason Twitter was able to launch Spaces is that they had an internal team that, this was an era when Twitter wasn't innovating at all from a product standpoint, right? It's like pre-Elon, they're moving at a glacial pace. They just happened to have a team that had been redoing some like WebRTC stuff related to Periscope. And so when Clubhouse kind of had its moment, it's like they had a brand new shiny core of being able. WebRTC is the protocol that actually allows you to do the audio. And so they were able to just kind of quickly, relative to Twitter speed at that point, launch Spaces. Any version of the world where they hadn't worked on that, I actually think Twitter would have never launched it. And then basically Clubhouse probably would have gotten to some place where clearly it was the place to do audio. And I think, they got a COVID bump, but I think what was challenging is Twitter's copy, in the same way that, frankly, Instagram stories and Snapchat, who originated the stories concept, like when you have more distribution and you're able to copy a core feature, it gets really difficult as a standalone app to actually build it off of that kind of like one breakthrough feature.
My impression, though, of the downfall of, this is a little bit of a tangent, but my impression of the downfall of kind of, what is it, real-time audio, social audio, whatever, was that it was just a COVID thing, right? Like even Twitter Spaces, relative to what it was doing during the pandemic, is just like much, much lower engagement today.
Yeah,
it was just a pandemic behavior.
Yeah, I think that there's probably some, kind of blending of what we're doing right now. We're using like a podcast recording studio. You have a couple of these that exist. And the idea that it kind of almost like you could do a live podcast that then easily turns into the content. I think most of the kind of broadcast platforms are audio only. There's no video, and it doesn't make it easy. So I think at some point someone will figure it out, and then it'll kind of be this super fans get the live show, right? Maybe a little unedited, a little bit more fun, and then kind of you can consume all of that content async. And I think that Clubhouse wasn't able to kind of figure that out fast enough before kind of losing people's interest.
So Clubhouse does illustrate a broader point, actually, that I think you mentioned Eugene Wei, his status as a service blog post, which for anybody who's interested in social, I highly recommend reading that post. It's kind of a masterpiece.
It's actually like a decade old now, right? More than that.
Yeah,
a decade.
It's pretty crazy. It's really old.
I think it's like 2016.
I think
that's 8 years.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Okay, right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
That's
I feel Ethereum. It's pre-Ethereum being on the map.
Yeah, I remember like being a different person when I read that post.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Well, so the point that I want to make is that one of the things that Eugene points out is that, generally speaking, when a new social media platform is able to really take on a life of its own and potentially supplant the previous generation, is when there's a modality shift. So, you go from short form text to long form text, or long form text to images to video, to short form video. There's generally some kind of shift. And Clubhouse was an example of that, right? There was this modality shift of, okay, we're doing real time, these, audio shows essentially. And that allowed new social networks to form, a new kind of status competition for people who are very good at that, who weren't necessarily good at podcasts or weren't necessarily good at, TikTok or whatever. How do you think of that in the context of what you're doing with Farcaster, which seems to be pretty directly laden over what Twitter is doing?
Yeah, so that's why I spent 3 years in the wilderness and not having kind of anyone pay attention for the most part, because what we were doing is building table stakes for, in 2024, you kind of have to have, the mobile app at a certain level of polish. You need the kind of base level features, likes, retweet equivalents, all that kind of stuff needs to kind of be there. And then we were kind of searching for what is our social primitive, right? Like what is the thing that is uniquely differentiated about Farcaster relative to Twitter? Otherwise, people just say it's a Twitter clone. And going back to the reason people churn, and like this is obvious in retrospect, but I go onboard all these people in 2021. I have a pretty sophisticated network both within Silicon Valley and crypto. So if you look at the initial 1,000 people on the network, like there's some pretty heavy hitters there. And everyone left, right? Why? They have massive audiences on Twitter.
Like Tom.
They spent a decade building those audiences. Like, why would you go from having 100,000 or 200,000 people on Twitter who follow you, get the dopamine of all those likes, to going to this new network? I mean, maybe other than the, ideologically pure person like Vitalik, who's like, yeah, 5 million followers on Twitter, doesn't matter. I'm going to use this really small social network because it's Ethereum aligned. Like, I think ultimately people are just rational and they're not going to go spend time on that. And so, especially in a world where it's basically just like Twitter, but way smaller. So 2 things. One, from that Eugene Wei essay, talks about most new social networks have a new social nobility that get minted. Are they basically the people who like emigrate from the other one because they are like the losers of the algorithm, or they're too far behind, and they show up to the new one in kind of like showing up to a new country, and then they build the new elite there because they were early, and then they benefit from the growth of the network, which I think we've seen with Farcasters. There's a lot of new faces who have actually big followings on Farcaster because they had kind of done the compounding early enough. And I think the second thing, and this goes back to the social primitive, is frames. Frames basically was the first thing that we launched that I think kind of people could crystallize around saying, oh, that is interesting and different. And it fundamentally is social, right? It's taking a link, which obviously in a previous era, Twitter was very good about sharing links. Like I remember the era of Twitter where it's like, that's where I'd go to find interesting links on the internet. And now we're in an era of Twitter saying, if you put a link in the first tweet, we're going to nerf you in the algo. So you kind of take the link, but then you say, because that's what a frame is, ultimately, it's just a link. And we said, what can we add on top of it that makes it both interactive and then I think more crypto native? And so very quickly, you had all of this experimentation and kind of creativity coming from developers. And that I think was the kind of catalyst to kind of start pulling people in from an attention standpoint to say, wow, there's actually a bunch of cool things that I can go do on this. And like, if I kind of like I'm into NFTs or I'm into meme coins or whatever, there's a frame for that. And I think that is the area that now I think we're doubling down on, because it's saying, okay, this is actually something that a social network where you have a strong guarantee that every user under the hood has an Ethereum wallet, right? Like, so in order to use the network, you have cryptographic key pair underneath. And so there's just a lot of creative freedom that developers can do. And I think that's, it took us 3 years, but I think we found something that, okay, let's try to double down on this and see how far we can grow it.
So if you look at Twitter today, anybody who posts on Twitter with, and if you touch crypto in any way, the first thing you notice about Twitter is that it is overrun with bots, with scams, with, anytime you post anything, there's just like 15 blocked comments below the fold that are, telling you to do some giveaway or whatever. And right now, so as a not active user of Farcaster, I have to ask, how do you think about moderation? And how do you think about, the inevitable influx of scammers and, these kinds of elements of crypto, given that you're running such a crypto native community?
Yeah, so a couple different things. So the first is, in order to sign up for Farcaster, and at this point, the protocol is actually permissionless, so you don't need to use our app, Warpcast, which is kind of the reference app. Anyone could, if you want to build your own client and directly interact with the smart contract, you're able to do that. But everyone has to pay $5. So you actually have to pay in order to create an account. So right there,
$5 to whom?
To the protocol. Like, there's a smart contract, there's a treasury contract. It's accumulating ETH, and so that gate by itself. Okay, so every time you want to create a spam account, it's going to cost you $5. And then the second layer comes in, where our app Warpcast, we are pretty aggressive about labeling accounts as spammy. And what's interesting about that is it actually is unaffected. Your account is unaffected at the protocol. But in terms of the attention of all the people on Warpcast, in the same way that Gmail can label any email it wants spammy, right? And ultimately, if you want the attention of a user of Gmail, you need to actually kind of follow their rules. That is the kind of second layer of, okay, wait, so if I go and I try to start spamming people, I'm going to get my account labeled as spam by the kind of Warpcast team, automated manual right now. Then I'm out $5 because I get no distribution. Now, you could get to a world where people get sophisticated on this, but I actually think just by having cost and then the ability to lose distribution, that is a natural kind of regulating force on people's behavior. I think the third thing, and part of this is just we are much smaller and we need to kind of make this work from a quality standpoint, is we can pull in a bunch of other signals because there's an on-chain element, right? So most of the people who are signing up for Farcaster actually connect an Ethereum address. We're about to add Solana addresses. So we can actually use that as kind of this public, ability to kind of look at address, kind of analyze it and say, okay, does this address look like it's spammy or not? And then you have all these additional signals that we can actually use that make it very hard for a programmatic botnet to kind of show up. And I think that if we nail quality early on, and we make that a focus just because we have no other alternative, then as we scale, that actually becomes a distinguishing feature of the network. Like I'm convinced that actually Twitter could go solve their spam problem. I think that they're probably doing it in too automated of a way versus actually being more scrappy, which is frankly, like, having read the Elon biography and nothing but respect for Elon Musk. Like I think he's an American hero. I'm surprised that someone hasn't like really gotten in there and fixed it. Like it actually feels like the crypto spam has gotten back to the level that it was at. It got like better for a little bit, but like anytime I tweet now, I get all this crypto spam, and I think part of it is just like people trying to do everything automated allows the spammers to get through versus actually just getting in their manual. Like one basic thing is like, why am I able to not just kind of like have one click ability to label things as spam as like a 15 plus year user of Twitter, 100,000 followers? And, like if basically I'm marking it as spam, you should probably trust me at this point. That like, I don't, there's a bunch of like low hanging fruit that I'm surprised that they haven't done.
So going back to this Gmail analogy, I thought that was an interesting one to contrast with. So right now, so we established Farcaster is totally decentralized. It's a protocol that anybody can build a client for, and it's kind of what many people have imagined that maybe someday Twitter might do is open the graph or open the algorithm itself so that anybody can see a tweet. Obviously, they haven't done this. This is not something that we see from the normal social media companies. But that said, Warpcast is by far the dominant client for Farcaster. Almost everybody who says, "Oh, sign up for Farcaster," they're pointing me toward Warpcast. And so in some sense, it actually is a lot like Gmail. Gmail obviously is one of the most dominant email clients. Gmail also exerts this kind of gravitational force over email. Email is technically permissionless. You could run your own email server if you wanted to, but it's kind of not a great idea in 2024 to run your own email server, because the way that Gmail labels you is ultimately going to determine whether or not you can really interact with the rest of the network, right? Because in some sense, like, yes, you are running SMTP and like that's the protocol, but in another sense, like, actually no, if Gmail decides that you're spam, you're just never going to get to anybody's inbox with your shitty little mail server. And so in some sense, is it not also true that if Warpcast is like where 95% or 98% of all the Farcast, I don't know what the number is, but if it's like the vast majority of all the Farcaster users, then can we not also say it's almost like Gmail? Well, you guys, Warpcast itself is exerting such a gravitational force over the network that like your moderation effectively is the moderation for Farcaster, the protocol.
Yeah, so I'd say a couple things there. One, that's entirely true at this point. So anyone who's tried to obviously I'm the one pitching it. So it's like, I am not trying to shirk away from that. It is extremely centralized in the sense that from a attention standpoint, which is the actual thing that you have to think about on a social network, right? It's like the people using it, but it's like, where are they spending their time? Warpcast has a disproportionate, impact, right? Like I label someone as spammy, effectively they disappear. There are two things that immediately come to mind though, is one, just like Ethereum or Bitcoin, I can take my Farcaster account and simultaneously use two different clients. You cannot do that with Gmail, right? Gmail, you're actually tied to the domain associated with Gmail. You could forward your email to another thing, but ultimately it's not like I can run on two different, like the backend service. You can use email clients, but the way actually you think about email is like the server that actually receives and hosts your email is the kind of centralizing point. So I think that's like one important thing is like there's seamless ability to kind of migrate in the same way that I can take a mnemonic from, MetaMask and move it to Coinbase Wallet and simultaneously use those. Like that freedom to move is very easy, and I think that's really important. And so in doing so, you allow exit in a world where Warpcast starts to get too aggressive, right? And I think the second thing, and this is actually the part where, and it doesn't really work most of the time in crypto, so I want to acknowledge that, but part of it is this, like, you have to trust us, like in the sense that like the goal is to build a protocol. Like we want the protocol. Like Vern and I had a lot of success at Coinbase, didn't necessarily have to go do any startup we wanted, but like ultimately when we started on this is saying like, wouldn't it be cool if we could get to a protocol that had 1 billion plus people using it that looked more like Ethereum or Bitcoin? And I think where we've done a decent job is we delivered on the core part of the protocol last year. We got it to 100% permissionless. You can sign up. You don't have to use a single Warpcast API. We have this kind of system of servers that sit above the blockchain called hubs. That's where all the social content is. Completely open source, permissionless. You can go write your own implementation if you want. And that system works right now, right? There are like 500 hubs running around the world. They're not even incentivized. So it's like people are just running them on their own. And so I think that is like a good first step in a good faith effort to say like, hey, this is something that we actually care about. But ultimately, until we get to a world where Warpcast doesn't have 95, 98%, whatever the market share we have right now, I would completely agree with you is that it is a network that technically is decentralized, but practically centralized from if the government comes in and forces me to do something, that you don't have that level of censorship resistance for most people. Whereas a world where and this is actually why we're so focused though on making Warpcast great, is our belief is that at least with social protocols, people don't use protocols, they use apps, right? And so no one actually cares for the most part. There are very few people who are very ideological and they're very special. They don't actually use an app because it's decentralized. They use the app because it's either entertaining or they meet other people and or potentially hook up with other people. Like those are the fundamental drivers of using a social app. And so our point of view, and I have a blog post about this, but it's like product-led protocol development. And it's if Warpcast can drive the growth of Farcaster to something on the order of 5 million daily active users or 50 million daily active users, I can promise you, assuming that core protocol remains, actually decentralized and permissionless, you will have venture-backed companies that come in and say, wait a second, I can build a better product than these guys, and start to peel away market share. In the same way that MetaMask was basically the only game in town for an Ethereum wallet for a while, right? I mean, we can RIP Mist, but like ultimately, you could argue that, MetaMask can have a disproportionate impact on the network. Ultimately, the free market came in and said, well, hell, I'm going to go build, so you have Coinbase Wallet, you have Rainbow, you have Rabby, so because the actual underlying network actually does work like that, people, are going to compete away that advantage, and so
our RIP my Ether wallet. I was about to say, I was like, there are a couple little gems.
I mean, talk about that security UX. You used to paste a seed phrase into a website.
I know. I'm not saying it was a good one. I'm just saying it was.
I don't know that MetaMask is a great example of an edge getting competed away. Unfortunately, it's like insanely sticky their dominance in market share.
Right, but I would say is I think that there's a healthy wallet market in the sense that if you're in the market for a new wallet today,
sure.
I don't think MetaMask has the dominant. They probably have a lot of brand awareness, but obviously Coinbase has 100 million customers that they can push Coinbase Wallet to, and I think. It's hard, right? Like, because I could take the ideological approach of like, we need 3 clients going on. And I think when I started working on Farcaster, I was naive in the thinking, the original name for the project was RSS Plus. So I come from a world of like RSS readers. I still use one. I'm a weird nerd like that. And I think I was under the impression that, once we get kind of like the core set up, we're going to have like a multiple sets of clients. I think where I was wrong on that, and this is pattern matching back to the days of like the early Twitter ecosystem when Twitter didn't even have a mobile app and you had like Tweety and Tweetbot and all these different kind of third-party independent, is it's 2024 and a consumer's expectation of what a social app and the performance of a social app and a mobile app rather than a web app. And so you have all this kind of like table stakes stuff that for like an indie developer to actually go build and like have a significant number of retained daily active users, I think that's really hard. And I think where we are is if we can get the total number of daily active users of the protocol from 50,000 to 500, 5 million, 50 million, then you're actually going to have it be a big enough market that you can actually get a kind of like real venture-backed team. And this is not to denigrate any of the independent developers. It's just like in terms of like building an experience that is going to actually take significant amount of market share from people who actually want to be using the product every day. And I think Frames is actually an update on my incorrect prior. Is I assumed the growth would happen as a result of people building other clients. I think that's still too hard for most people. Whereas Frames allow independent developers within a very short period of time, right? Like if you're a decent developer, you can have a frame up and running in an hour or two and actually have it launched in the feed. No app store approval, no have to go get a DUNS number to get like your app store, like all these kind of things that block developers. And the important thing is you have distribution, right? So you can go viral with a frame really fast. Whereas imagine trying to launch a website that does anything crypto today outside of like kind of having some big venture backing and like a big PR campaign. Good luck getting your link in a Twitter feed to go viral, right? Whereas on launching a frame, which is almost like a gateway to your app, right? Like you can use a frame and a click on a frame is authenticated with the EDDSA signature for a Farcaster user. So kind of like the underpinning identity component. But you can actually click into an app and have it basically be one-click onboarding into an app. It's almost like sign in with Google or Apple. And so I think that was a change in our perspective as saying, there is a lot of developer demand. It's just today, relative to the size of Farcaster, it's not building alternative clients. It's tapping into this distribution on this growing social network where everyone is crypto native. And part of it is Warpcast has said, yeah, we're not going to nerf links. We think this is good. Like it's good for growth of the protocol. And so that's I think kind of where we are.
So actually, coming to the frame kind of inspiration, as far as I understand, it does share a lot of similarities with the Facebook sort of early days API, maybe 2013, I want to say 2014,
like 2007, apps.
Yeah, but it was like this graph API, right? That was like the key thing. And so, I guess in that case, it didn't succeed because it was a fight between the platform and the app developers in some ways. How do you see that evolving here in a place where like you can't really stop the app developers, which is the point of the network, but also that such that like it has some
with moderation you can, right? I mean that was the thing that we just
sure, but
Warpcast
like,
having the effect of monopoly.
But let's suppose that we're in some world where there's a way for Warpcast. Let's say there are alternative clients, and maybe it's like Ethereum. There's only 6. There's not 500. The number of clients doesn't scale with the number of users, but it's greater than 2 or something. Well, Ethereum and Solana, let's say those are only really 2 that have credibly multiple clients. And so, how do you kind of view? And so, let's say moderation becomes hard in this. At least three clients. It's like BFT. They all can't agree on moderation, so like at least one of them will accept your thing.
Which, by the way, would be an amazing outcome. In the sense that there's no monopoly, there's no oligopoly, right? SMTP is essentially an oligopoly. Like Amazon and Gmail, they share their block lists, right?
And yeah, so let's say we got to that point, and so yes, you could censor, but you'd have to get all the different clients to collude. So, in that world, how do you view frames evolving right now? If you like took the history of like how developers tried to make all this stuff in the early days of kind of the social network growth and then kind of got stopped, how would you how do you see that evolving, and like where do you want that to go, and what's your like best unbiased estimate of where it goes?
Yeah, so I mean, kind of hard to predict. Frames are 2.5 weeks old.
For sure. But this is a podcast. So, we're allowed to speculate. We're allowed to speculate wildly and wave our hand.
Yeah, so let's just kind of take Facebook for example. So it's 2007, 2008. It's a desktop-oriented platform with that kind of Facebook launches. You actually brought up Open Graph is the standard. So Open Graph is the reason that sometimes when you paste a link into a messaging app or Twitter, there's an image that shows up versus other links don't. If you go Google Open Graph today, it's a literally like a single page website that Facebook still hosts. So it's like the equivalent of the tailbone of like Web 2. It's like, yeah, Open Graph exists, but Facebook doesn't care about Open Graph for the most part. And the reason Facebook, and kind of pieced this together through people who were kind of living through Facebook at that era, but basically it didn't make the transition to mobile. One, because the mobile platforms at the time just didn't have the performance, right? Like, Netflix streams video games now through the Netflix app. Like, they can do it in the cloud. But at the time, like, building a Farmville within the limitations of an iPhone was just not going to work, the whole Steve Jobs Flash thing. So there was like basically no way to translate this to mobile. Facebook goes public in 2012, and there's a very famous, like, the company just completely burned the boats in terms of like just focus on mobile. And it turns out they had this insane business model of app install ads, specifically games. And, who cares about the platform? So kind of rugged all those developers, Zynga being the kind of like most prominent, it's a public company that was basically built off Facebook games. I think where we are is it's slightly different in the sense that one, frames are simpler than Facebook apps were, right? Like there were pretty sophisticated Facebook apps and games. If frames, it's just literally an image with 4 buttons. And I think the magic of what makes frames great is that it can kind of enable these crypto economic actions in a very seamless way because the data itself on the network is completely permissionless, right? So when I click on a button that says like mint right now, what's actually happening is the developer is getting kind of like my FID, the kind of ID number that, Tom has the lowest one in this group, but my FID is 3. So then basically the developer is like, okay,
yours is lower.
Wait, who's 1 and 2? Wait, what?
Farcaster, the account.
No.
Farcaster, and then Varun did more of the work in the early days, so
yeah.
he got 3 too.
Okay, got it.
But I think so you kind of like basically are able to just programmatically say, okay, for FID 3, give me their connected Ethereum address. When we launch a Solana, you could just like grab that and then just shoot an NFT to that address. And so that can all instantly happen with one button click. And so that is something that is not the same as like playing a game like Farmville, where you're like sitting there clicking, like harvesting carrots or whatever. And it is like kind of like you're interacting with this thing ephemerally in a feed, and then you're continuing to go. But that is actually an interesting thing in the sense that that attracts a very specific type of user. In the sense that like, okay, like you have now all of a sudden all these people are like, I can get free stuff. I can get free NFTs. I can get free, meme coins or whatever. So that set of users, if you were to kind of try to rug frames, assuming we can continue to grow the protocol, right? Like, so just to be clear, I have no intention of rugging frames, but in a world where you say Dan disappears and Warpcast is run by like kind of Dilbert minion people, the other clients on the network are going to compete away those users very quickly, because it'll say, hey, like you want to get your distribution with frames, which benefits whether it's a developer or creator, use this client. So you're going to have a massive group of users that are going to go switch over to that pretty quickly. I think that the second thing is where I think Warpcast and other clients are going to quickly start to kind of like figure out is like frames basically turn into this like Web3 crypto native ad format. And that's not like we're going to go have ads tomorrow, but I think it becomes this kind of like clear thing where if you think about like what a Facebook ad is for install a game, in this case, it's the launching point for something that happens on chain, right? And whether that's a swap or a mint or some verb that someone hasn't come up with yet. And I would imagine that will be something that instead of like, I don't want these to exist, it's like, no, actually, this is like good. Like I want as many people to build these like kind of like interactive links, essentially, because that benefits the platform both from a usage standpoint as well as a potential future monetization standpoint. And so that I'm not misquoted, like we're not adding ads with frames anytime soon, but I would imagine you can build something that is user aligned and basically be able to, basically if there's an economic action happening as a result of you clicking a button, someone will be willing to pay the person that originates that action. In the same way that an Amazon referral link, like huge business for a lot of like kind of bloggers back in the early 2010s. But basically, if you link to any book on Amazon from your blog, you got an 8% commission if someone ordered that book. I don't think anyone found that offensive because obviously if I didn't want to recommend a book, I'm not going to, but if I do, like I get a cut. And so I actually think that there's going to just be natural ways of being kind of user aligned while also being able to make money that I think naturally people want to continue to support frames, whether it's the Warpcast client or another client.
So I have a question for you. The Web 2 mantra is you're the product. If you're not paying, you're the product, right? Basically, sorry, I'm butchering the original statement, but
Close enough.
But the interesting thing, I think, at least when we look at certain things in frames, like the DEGEN airdrop, it's not clear who the product or the user is. In the case of like, you could argue that DEGEN used a frame as a form of advertising, but then the user is getting paid to like engage with the ad, right? Like indirectly. And I think that to me is the most interesting part about having the ability to control these economic relationships.
You could also, that's in a way true for airdrop farmers generally, is that it's not clear what the product is, right? Like, is the user the product, or is the product the airdrop they're getting, or like?
But the thing here is it's almost like a loot box. It's more like a loot box in a frame than it is like a airdrop farm. Like I'm looking, I feel like it has a completely different UX to the end user, right? The end user is just like, haha, I click this link, it's funny. Oh, wow, I got airdropped, right? Versus like the intention, it's like passively getting airdropped randomly. And I think like that's an interesting, to me, that seems to be one of the more interesting like user modalities that has happened in the last few weeks.
And I have to wonder like how much of that is a function of what the early Farcaster user base is composed of right now. Like as you mentioned, Dan, the initial user base was like these kind of high powered crypto, big dick types who are generally have much higher net worth than the average.
Hasib, are you insulting Tom here? You're
Yeah, that's obviously why he had to get off platform.
Check that.
No. What I mean is that the average ARPU for Twitter is what, like less than $10, something like that. Right? I have to imagine for Yeah, I guess because they monetize terribly.
But Facebook in the US is $200 per user.
Yeah, Facebook is crazy, but everyone else is
so
like,
I would right. So I'd have to imagine that like the early cohort of Farcaster users, probably the ARPU, if you are monetized, if you're thinking about it as like
wait. Usually Haseeb is the one correcting people on acronym usage, but ARPU means average revenue per user, so that any listener.
Yes. Okay. There you go. Very nice. Okay. So I have to imagine the early user base at Farcaster is probably much higher than that if they were being fully monetized on an equivalent basis to Facebook. And that might be why they're a very attractive user base for airdrops and, this kind of thing. Like, hey, mint my NFT, do my this thing, because on average, I'm just going to be hitting a lot of really high value users. If you do scale to the 500,000, the 5 million, the 50 million, then it's kind of like, okay, how many random Twitter users do I actually want to give my airdrop to? Maybe zero, right? Maybe just on average.
But you're missing the point. You're missing the point that like airdrop farming in general is usually a very active activity. Like I go into it being like, I want to do this, right? But the frames thing is interesting because it's like passive. People are just scrolling and randomly clicking a link and maybe get an airdrop.
Right. Like but I guess what I'm implying is that, yes. So the question is like, okay, if you are launching some meme coin, all right, you want to decide how to get your meme coin to get net buyers. Okay. And the assumption is that, okay, if I airdrop this to a random person on Farcaster, the calculus for them must be that this airdrop is going to result in a net buy, right? If I give this person free DEGEN token or whatever tokens, I'm guessing they're going to be a net buyer. And if I airdrop to a random person on Twitter, my guess is that they're a net seller. They're going to say, oh, here's a great airdrop. Great. Well, let me sell this thing.
I think that's too
therefore
simplistic. I think that's
can I so two things, and this is already starting to happen. So let me step back though on so naturally with any new primitive, people are using it for all these different things. So one, there is very much an airdrop meme coin and NFT oriented, click a button and get something, right? Ton of growth has happened as a result of that. That said, there are a bunch of other developers who are kind of like building other applications. And I think, for example, Farcon was selling tickets through, the conference, the community run conference for Farcaster. And so someone sold Girl Scout cookies. And so someone actually today launched some Shopify integration with this. So basically you're kind of offering a primitive where basically you can do an economic action in the feed and it's using a blockchain. And so that is going to be a whole canvas. I think where the kind of like meme coin and NFT collectible stuff, free stuff, I think people are getting actually much more sophisticated even within the last 2 weeks, where now they're actually taking that FID and they're actually looking up your effectively page rank on the network. So we have this like active badge concept where it's like you have to have X number of followers and you have to have a ratio of like post to engagement. And so now you can actually, and I'm calling it social proof of work, but I could just get really specific on saying, okay, I only want people who are, influencers or people who have a certain level of clout. I don't know if you guys remember this company in Silicon Valley, not BitClout, but Clout. There's actually a whole element of that where not only can you take the social proof of work that you have from the network, right? So you're ship posting, you're doing whatever you do every day, and now you're getting benefit, okay? There's a second component though, where if you connect your on-chain address, all of the public activity could actually be incorporated. It's like, I only want Pudgy Penguin.
So now you're sieving down even further who is worthy of your airdrop, right?
And
like
it's all permission.
Who is actually definitely going to be a net buyer.
Yes. So imagine if you said, I want the overlap of everyone has a Pudgy Penguin and the
buyers. Yeah.
For meme coins, what else would they be thinking about?
But I think you want to establish the early lovers of the thing before you just start being like, hey, you want to think about the price, right? Like Dogecoin came from the love of the dog first before it kind of grew. Like I think you're not sympathetic to people who are in this world, Steve. That's what I've learned from this.
I think a lot of the new generation of meme coins are just moved much faster than that. I don't think it's about love of the dog. I think it's about, being early in a cycle or like a sort of mini wave.
So maybe let me paint a version where, because I think there's such a negative association with airdrops and meme coins of just like, it's like free money, it's kind of sybiled or things like that. You can imagine a world where, whether it's like an EAS on-chain credential or some proof that like I could basically target the entire network and just say, I want anyone who has an open source commit on a GitHub repo. And that now my, Aptos or Sui or whatever L1 blockchain wants to get people to build on their thing. is saying, here you go. You, as a developer, you can click this button in a frame and immediately shows up in your wallet. Okay. And so I think that starts to get much more interesting because A, all the data is permissionless, and B, you can target based on a social graph. And so and again, all totally opt in, right? Or maybe you just say, hey, I'm going to look at the network and I'm just going to airdrop to these people. So you don't even need the frame. But I think
I
part
love
of
that you described
like,
the Celestia airdrop. By the way, the airdrop to GitHub.
I mean, there are a number of them. Yeah, a number of them have worked that way. That's
well, they were
very,
the first
very
one, and then everyone copied after.
Right, but the point is here is I don't need to even touch a button on your site. Someone can basically just say, hey, this has been airdropped to your account if you want to claim it or whatever. Like, and so I think that will be a whole area of experimentation. And then I think the second thing is, you could imagine there just becomes like very ongoing economic relationships. So like I can provably look to see if you've been following me the whole time, right? So if you're following my account, maybe I'm giving, as a company, I'm giving some benefit to the people who are broadcasting my message or things like that. And so, everyone talks about this idea that like own your data and like get paid for your data. The reality is Ben Thompson has done an amazing job profiling this. It's like your data is probably not worth anything, but there is a version of the world where you as a person with an audience can actually choose to amplify things and then actually participate on the upside in a programmatic way. I don't know if that's going to be something that people are that excited about, but like I think it's just going to be a surface area that people are going to play around with, right? And I think the reality is like on Twitter now with the creator rewards, is anyone like being like, maybe some people are making life-changing money because they have these huge accounts, but like the reality is it's like Twitter's paying me $600 a month to use Twitter. Like, great. Like, I'm more incentivized to use it. And so I think that just being able to do that in a way that is not centralized and just like allow anyone the creative freedom of saying like, hey, if you're doing X actions in a way that is beneficial to my brand and or my account as a kind of audience, I think you're going to just get interesting use cases. And then I think that the other important thing is, so if you're listening to this podcast and you're going, oh, this sounds awful, like Farcaster is going to be loaded with ads and it's just going to be all meme coins and scams.
But you're getting
the beauty of the
for
system.
The ads.
The beauty of the system is you can go use a client that is like Zen mode. It like doesn't use any of the dopamine tactics of social media, and it's just like you just see, the great takes from Vitalik and Tarun and like all these kind of like gigabrain, philosopher types, and you don't have to see any of the DEGEN content. And that system can coexist. And I think that is what I'm most excited about is you get to a world where you have the freedom to choose as an end user, how do you want to play this game? And that's all well and good. That's all well and good. But we are a crypto podcast, and so we're here for the DEGEN stuff. I want to shift a little bit because I really like that you brought up this like whole meme coin thing, and I kind of want to delve a little bit and kind of get people's perspectives, maybe a little bit a layer above Farcaster, of what you think about right now the meta around meme coins, because it seems like so obviously in large part that's driving a lot of the engagement around Farcaster. It's driving a lot of the engagement around everything, to be honest. Like a lot of the activity on Solana is trading meme coins. What are your guys' feelings about where this meme coin just I don't know what the best metaphor for it is. It seems like kind of a what's that physics thing that rotates really fast and
motion machine? Perpetual
centrifuge?
No, centrifuge. Like this sort of meme coin centrifuge that we seem to be playing. What are your Tom? What's your take on what's happening in the meme coin world?
Wait, I don't understand the centrifuge analogy. We're separating the meme coins from the good coins?
No, okay, maybe. All right, Ferris wheel. I don't know. All right, fast moving Ferris.
Spelled FERROUS, of course. It's a Ferris.
Yes,
in science.
Amazing.
Anyway,
amazing. Nailed it.
I mean, it just feels very like mask off. I think that's been a little of the market for the past year or two has been I think like NFTs, for example. Initially, it was like, okay, it's going to be about art, and for a long time, it was about sort of artists selling art, and then it was PFPs, and people were like, no, we just love this lion or whatever, and then Blur came along and was like, no, actually, you just want to trade the fucking tokens back and forth, and really you do that really well, and that was kind of what Blur was doing. I feel like meme coins are almost sort of like the next evolution of that, of like you don't actually even care about the picture of the lion that you're trading, you just want to trade like the concept And that's what meme coins are doing is like, imagine like 2021 10K PFP launches, but like just distilled down to like the pure essence. And that's what you're getting out of the centrifuge is this meme coin essence.
All day meme coin.
Tarun, what's your take?
By Tom. Like the meme coin essence. your fragrance coming out soon.
Very musky.
My take is actually maybe more. The optimistic take is that the meme coins. I like this idea of meme coins that are conditional, and I think that's where the Farcaster meme coins seem very different than like the Solana meme coins. The Solana meme coins are like, haha, Drake, wore a funny hat with a name on it, and so we're going to make a meme coin that is the same name and trade it, right? It's like marketed towards DEGEN gamblers. The one where it's like I'm using this thing and like randomly get loot boxes feels like almost more like just like Roblox or something. Like it's like social Roblox where you're like converting the dopamine hit from like likes into dopamine hit from like random I get something, which to me seems extremely different from like the absolute like Solana DEGEN meme coin. And so I kind of think of them as two separate types of things. So one is like almost like a game that you get random rewards in. And the other one is like you're really going in and the game is like who you suckered in your group chat to buy last, like that, which is a very different ethos, I think. That's what, to me, that's why I think like the ironically named DEGEN coin on base is like a funny example of this. But I think like there could be a world where meme coins become this kind of like incentivized action thing. And yeah, like kind of like I was saying, like I don't know where the boundary is between the two worlds.
Dan, what's your take? Where do you think meme coins are going as a concept?
Yeah, so just to be clear, I'm not involved in any of the meme coins, and I'm back from my Coinbase days. I just don't touch. Like I own Bitcoin and ETH, and that's it. Like I'm as in coin stock, right? That said, I think one interesting thing to build on what you said, Tarun, is I think it fundamentally comes down to it's people self-organizing over the internet over kind of some shared thing, and it. At least the ones that exist on Farcaster, DEGEN being kind of like the most prominent. There were actually a few that happened in December, Points and a few other ones. But the thing that I think is stuck with DEGEN is that they've created a mimetic culture around it in the same way that Doge and I'm less familiar with some of the Solana ones. But one interesting behavior is they built a tip bot. So like basically people will reply. Like I have a bunch of followers on Farcaster. I'll say something, and then I get all these like people replying to me with like DEGEN, like 420 DEGEN or like 69 DEGEN, and it's an entirely like an off chain. It's just like a ledger, and there's some airdrop. I actually don't even know enough about the mechanics, but basically it's created a whole culture. And then now people will tip DEGEN things that people are using. Linda G's like Bounty Caster, which was like USDC and is like hire a developer to do something for you. They now support like paying in DEGEN. I think like Zora now allows you to mint in DEGEN. So there is like this like kind of like rewards points component to it that because it actually has a social layer deeply integrated in it that I think it's easy to dismiss because it's just like, oh, this is just a Ponzi scheme or some like sucker's bet. But I think I'm sure people are coming in and saying, how can I make money on this? But I think that there's a component where it's actually like people come for the meme coin and stay for the culture. I think that like that channel on Farcaster, it's its own subreddit effectively. People show up and it's entertainment. It's like, oh, I get to like, what is the latest like meta in DEGEN today? And like, what are we doing like as a group? In the same way that I think Wall Street Bets, everyone focuses on the AMC stock price and, GameStop. But the reality is I think it was a community of people. And it feels like, oh, I'm finding like-minded people on the internet. And there's also this component that it's a little bit like it's groundswell bottoms up against the man in some ways. And so I think that there's like an actual something actually there as a meta category, but I don't think anyone's quite captured it. Maybe Farcaster has, and we don't even realize it. But I think it's very easy to dismiss because it's easy to look at the the rugs and the kind of clear fraud and pump and dump cases. But I think in the case of like these community driven bottoms up meme coins, I don't know. I think it's easy to overlook them in terms of like there is some interesting human phenomenon happening.
Yeah, I think as you're saying that, it occurs to me that meme coin is kind of a superposition of multiple things at the same time, right? On the one side, it is, like you said, a community of, okay, we're all the people who hold DEGEN, or we're all the people who hold, WIF or whatever. At the same time, it's also an inside joke. So there's something about, like, there's something that's like intrinsically kind of funny and subversive about like sitting around trading a meme coin or accumulating a meme coin. And then I think the other hand, it's also a lottery ticket. And this is the kind of the financial behavioral part of a meme coin, which is hard to ignore, is that a lot of people, the reason why they buy a meme coin is that they saw what happened on Reddit or on some Twitter post of some guy who bought, the meme coin of the day, and it went up, 150x. And it's like, oh my God, this person made life-changing money. And every time you see a new meme coin, the question in the back of your mind is like, maybe this is the one. Maybe this is my, this is my buying Doge early, or my buying, this thing or that thing. And it is in some sense, it's not that dissimilar as Tom was pointing out to what was happening with NFTs and PFPs in the last cycle. And it seems like that behavior on the NFT side is kind of being replaced more and more with meme coins, where meme coins are creating these communities. They're not bound by 10,000 people. They don't have an arbitrary entrance price. And so in some sense, if that was the role that NFTs were playing in the last cycle, meme coins are a better way to play that role, because they are obviously, they're fungible. You can play for $5. If you're on Solana, you can play with $1. And so it's more inclusive in that sense. They're more scalable beyond 10,000 people. You don't have to be you don't have to be able to pay $50,000 in order to play this game. It does seem at the same time that there are, like, the velocity of meme coins is also what's really unique, right? Like there are new meme coins being launched every single day, and the meta's shifting, and like
the velocity of memes on the internet is like that, right? Like it's not just the
yes.
part. It's like closer, but like the first part is what quite important there, right? It's not like I have to come up with a series of attributes that this collection has that represent. Right? Like, no,
right, that's true. They are more efficient in that way, right? Like you don't really need to do the pretense of, well, we hired an artist and we created a universe that these PFPs belong to. Instead, it's just, okay, this one has a new name, and
distilled meme essence.
I want to, distilled meme. There you go. Tom's got to make a cent now. But the one thing I want to say is, like, if you think about these communities around NFTs, historically, they just centered around Discord. And in Discord, you were disconnected from your wallet. And what that meant is you got a fuck ton of scams, right? Like Discord is just filled with spam of like people trying to like rug you, give you fake wallet addresses, whatever, like malicious malware type stuff. And I think that interesting thing of like, if the social app is actually directly tied to crypto and your wallet is already there, and you can be confident that like when you sign something, like you don't have to really think about, oh, like, is this link going to make me sign something malicious? That does change your interaction with the asset in a way that I think like the Discord being separate from the asset added so much extra friction for the end user.
And to actually build on that, so one of the things with frames today, and we're adding on-chain transaction support, so there's got to be a layer of security that we'll add there when we do it. And that's like over the next week or so. Most of the way the frames work today is you tap a button and then someone is actually sending you that asset to your address. So there's actually no risk to you, right? You didn't have to sign anything. You didn't give any scary permissions. It's just kind of, it's like, okay, drop something in your mailbox. That's the kind of interaction. The other thing, see, when you were kind of mentioning the kind of last talk about where meme coins sit, I just think about the Super Bowl. We just had, this huge cultural event. It's like the most watched Super Bowl in history, right? And Taylor Swift and all this kind of like the meta stories about it and the memes. $23 billion are bet on it. Like, it's a fundamental human behavior of like, oh, if I put a little bit of money on this, like it makes it a little bit more interesting for me. And I don't think anyone is kind of, I mean, maybe there are some people, but for the average person, they're putting whatever, $50, $100 in the game. And it intensifies the euphoria of having that game, that entertainment be interesting, right? And I think if you think about how sad, like a lottery ticket, right? So it's like, I don't even know what the figure of people who spend money on Powerball or lottery tickets in the US, right? Completely acceptable because the government's getting all that money, by the way. And then, they say, oh, it's paying teachers. But the reality is like it's taking advantage of the fact that there's a fundamental human interest in, if I put a little bit of money in here, I could make a bunch of money and I didn't have to actually work for it. And so I think that it's easy to like judge meme coins, which actually kind of like there's a cultural element, there's a mimetic element. It's like people actually, potentially making friendships online and saying, oh, those are bad. But this thing that is depressing when you go to the gas station and people are spending, $50 a day buying scratchers, like your moral positioning, right? I kind of project.
That's a good point. To be clear, I'm not taking a moral stance on any of these things.
No.
Like, I used to be a professional gambler.
Dismisses meme coins.
Yeah, well, you just came up with the greatest KPI for meme coins, which is total volume per day of meme coins divided by the Super Bowl betting volume.
What?
Like, I feel like that's a good measure of like are meme coins making it.
Yeah. So here's the point that I made this a couple of weeks ago on the Empire podcast, is that I increasingly think that the meme coin meta is probably not sustainable. And actually, the reason why I make that argument is an analogy to gambling. So if you look at gambling, so if you look at lotteries, or if you even look at, the most popular casino game is slots. And slot machine manufacturers, I mean, it's probably, one of the most lucrative industries. An enormous amount of human capital and research and engineering goes into optimizing slot machines to maximize the amount of money they make from gamblers. And if you're optimizing a slot machine, there's multiple things you're doing at the same time, right? You're doing this variable reward ratio, making loud sounds and wonderful lights when people win. You're not. The important thing is that you're not making people lose too fast. So you make them lose just enough money that they sit there, they feel like they can win, but mathematically they're losing something like 20 cents for every pull or something like that. There's some really obscene number that you can optimize a slot machine into basically making a rake on every single pull. And the problem I would argue with meme coins is that because meme coins have such high churn, right? There are like new meme coins being launched, every single week, and it's not like we're all trading Doge still. Like obviously there are a bunch of people still trading Doge, but the velocity of meme coins has materially increased. Yeah, but the velocity of meme coins has really materially increased. And my argument is that I think Dogecoin is sustainable. Dogecoin can keep going up and down forever because it's more or less the only rake is being made by Binance and Coinbase, right? Otherwise, there's kind of no loss of free energy, so to speak. But for most meme coins, they are just too extractive because there's a new team launching a new meme coin every single day, right? With NFTs, there were very well understood. Obviously there were bad actors sometimes with NFTs, but there were relatively well understood norms about, okay, how much of the NFT mint goes to the creators and the royalties and this and that, right? Like there was more or less a well understood game that limited the amount of energy loss or the amount of rake that was taken by these users. But when somebody launches a new meme coin, it's like, look, my one meme coin took off. I've made like 20 of them. This is the one that took off. So I just got to fucking extract. And when people are paying for the lottery ticket of like, okay, I buy this new meme coin, overwhelmingly, they're like, look, I have no idea whether or not this lottery creator is taking out 50% or taking out 30% or taking out 10%.
Next time you're in the
argument
US,
is that
I want you to go to a deli and count the number of different fucking lottery tickets and then go back to the same deli a month later and count the number that are the same. The state is also turning these like
but the state is very highly optimized in the same way, right? I mean, lotteries are super highly optimized to be the maximal amount of extractiveness to maximize revenue.
At least here,
but that's because it's a repeat player. Because it's a repeat player. That's the core of my argument.
Than the state doing it. The state's version of this is like even crazier to me.
Than slot machines?
Than the meme coins. Like if I view the meme coins for their lottery ticket value, I think the way that states introduce and remove lottery tickets is completely not transparent. They're just like, oh yeah, sure, we're gonna make some new like $100 game, and okay, actually it didn't perform well, so we're gonna get rid of it. And I don't know, the meme coin thing at least seems more friendly to people who aren't over 50 for that type of experience.
On what basis do you say that? That it's more friendly. I mean, it's obviously more attractive to people who are under 50.
They're both aggressively optimizing for extracting a rake, right? Like
I think Haseeb's point is the state, is careful not to like overgraze the commons. Whereas when you have, a bunch of random devs out there.
I don't know if that's true either.
I think they found the Pareto optimal where they can extract.
Clearly they have, because people still buy lottery tickets.
But they also collude, right? Like to do the Powerball type of shit, where like multiple states are like, here, how do we increase our rake? We make a cartel. It's like, I don't know. Like I can't really like fault the meme coin creators for this. Like I think this is a fake moral high horse you're living on.
I'm not making a moral argument. I'm making an economic argument. Is that because meme coins as a whole will end up becoming too extractive, people will move on to a new meta. So it was PFPs, now it's meme coins, and they'll pick something else when meme coins start feeling too extractive.
But maybe one thing to think about is, does the equilibrium start to happen where you get more and more transparent in terms of, talking about the NFT projects, to a point where it's, okay, the founding group of the meme effectively says we're only taking whatever 1% or 5%. And the rest is kind of unlocked over time. There's a proof of work component to it. And so you get to actually a market in the same way that, I don't know, like think about an IPO, right? Completely different thing. Like basically the bank is able to just take a 15% dilution on so there naturally becomes a point where you say, hey, there is value in creating a mimetic thing. TBD on how long it lasts, and you can get into that. But maybe the actual the Pareto optimal long term is, if I can create a meme that lasts as long as Doge, that actually makes me the most money in a world where, even though I only own 1%, but has a $10 billion market cap, that actually.
I agree with that, but the market is telling us that's not what people are shooting for, right? And this is why I think, if you remember Zach XPT, he got a bunch of people mad at him. Normally, he's like one of these Twitter heroes because he's constantly unveiling these frauds. A lot of people got mad at him because he was just shitting on meme coins, saying that, like, look, overwhelmingly meme coins are fraud, pump and dump, blah, 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 blah. And I have to assume that for the average meme coin, or sorry, I should say the median meme coin, that's probably true. The best meme coins are genuinely community-led, kind of, no rake. They're just, in it for the love of the game. It's just a funny meme and it ends up taking off. But most meme coins are, they're enterprises, right? There's people basically trying to make money running their own mini lottery. Maybe
this is the point, though. These socially driven meme coins, which are like, again, they're not like this like active thing that like, someone is creating with like a lot of intent of like trying to get a bunch of liquidity and the price go up. Someone is just adding it in another experience, might have a totally different equilibrium than the like,
Yeah, I think if you remember DAICOs, that was like this thing that Vitalik came up with about
the DICO. I remember those things. That was like so funny. It was so complicated.
Yeah. So the idea was that, in the ICO era, ICOs were literally, okay, we just sell a bunch of tokens and whatever we get a bunch of money. The whole idea of a DAICO, which Vitalik postulated, and I think no one ever actually did, was that we raise money from retail to buy our token, but we don't actually get the money until we hit certain milestones that like the token holders vote on. And so the money technically could never get released if we don't actually hit the milestones. And so you can imagine if we create this norm around meme coins such that the team only gets their, meme coin drop or whatever if this thing becomes like Doge. And it's like, okay, you know what? If you do create a lottery that's as good as that, then okay, you deserve 10%, but you got to really be enterprising.
These social experiences give you a lot of events that you can condition on, right? Which is like other things in crypto. You have to like do a lot more work to get like Sybil proofness, right? And things like that. At least here, you're like, you have this, proof that you've like kind of done this thing and it's documented and you can use it as your conditions for distribution.
Maybe one other just kind of thought is, so let's just take away the version where you can buy into it at the beginning and it's strictly proof of work, right? So, and like, let's use something that is not going to happen in crypto anytime soon, but let's say Taylor Swift basically had a Taylor coin on some cheap chain. And the idea is all the Swifties on Twitter who basically just like, protect her from these deep fake porn things and all that, like, the army of Swifties that are online, right? Are flying back and forth with Swifty, the coin, that basically you can't buy into or whatever. And then at some point, it like actually turns into this economic thing where people care enough about this little token that they're willing to be like, okay, well, I want to be able to use this on Shopify to buy like, I don't know, whatever merch. And so all of a sudden people are willing to take this because it gets to a point where there's some, exchange rate with dollars. And if no one had to buy in and the idea is like you ended up doing the drop completely based on proof of work, like I think it's just easy to dismiss because the current meta looks like the Mississippi company to say stocks are bad. We're going to basically get rid of this financial primitive. Whereas like, obviously you get to the point of, 1930s, like you put the SEC in place, not to say the SEC has made every right decision, but obviously, the joint stock corporation is an extremely valuable way of organizing humans and capital. I think that there's something there in terms of the idea of social mimetic value being exchanged. It's very fundamentally human, right?
So your solution is that we need to reinvent the SEC is basically what you're saying.
Exactly.
Bring Gary Gensler to meme coins. I think that's the problem.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, with that, we're at time, so we got to wrap. Dan, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. This was awesome. How can people find you on Farcaster?
DWR
on Farcaster. You heard.
Well, also
right.
on Twitter, right? But for both,
same
Also
name, same pirate
also
avatar.
on Twitter.
Yeah.
Also on Twitter. Also, if you want to find Tom, you're not active anymore.
I guess I'm active again now. I'm just Tom H. Schmidt, also on Twitter.
Tom H. Schmidt. And
no, I'm Tom actually at
Farcaster ID.
I got the Tom.
Pinged.
Very nice.
Pinged.
Yeah.
P-I-N-G-E-D. By the way, the Taylor Swift thing might. What's the funniest thing is there's someone from crypto who was at her birthday party. So maybe that that's the missing link to the Swiftie meme coin.
Okay, let's make it happen.
When someone figures out the celebrity way to do meme coins that is SEC compliant, I can promise you every celebrity will have a meme coin.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, sure. I guess that's where the meta's going. That's actually going full circle with like NFTs in the early days being about celebs, and now meme coins are going to go. Okay. Anyway, everything old is new. All right, that's it. Thank you, everybody.